It seems like the passionate reunion between Valentin and Carly after his release from custody was the exact catalyst needed to push Lulu over the edge. We all saw that deeply emotional moment in the hospital parking lot, a moment that proved Valentin and Carly are deeply intertwined in a blossoming romance. But while Carly was filled with immense relief, Lulu was entirely consumed by rage. High chances are, Lulu simply cannot stomach the reality that Valentin is moving on, finding happiness, and stepping out of the dark shadow of his past sins. So, she interrupted his private moment with Charlotte because she absolutely refuses to let Valentin find any peace. What if Lulu's intense reaction was not just about protecting her daughter, but rather a manifestation of her own deep-seated need to control every single narrative surrounding her family? The unconfirmed leaks suggest that Lulu will double down on her aggressive tactics, desperately trying to build a fortress around Charlotte to keep Valentin out. The truth might be way more complicated than Lulu merely acting as a protective mother. It seems like she is clinging to an outdated version of Valentin, refusing to acknowledge any of his growth or the sacrifices he recently made. High chances are, Lulu wants Valentin permanently defined by his past transgressions because it justifies her rigid stance. By constantly reminding everyone of his danger, she gives herself a righteous excuse to sever his bond with Charlotte. But what if this relentless crusade is completely blinding her to the actual emotional needs of her own child? These behind-the-scenes whispers indicate that Lulu is operating in an echo chamber of her own fears, completely ignoring the fact that Charlotte has always adored her father. Charlotte does not see a monster. She sees the man who loves her unconditionally. If Lulu continues to invalidate her daughter's feelings, it seems like she is unknowingly planting the seeds of deep resentment. What if Charlotte is already reaching her breaking point with her mother's suffocating rule? High chances are, every time Lulu blocks Valentin from seeing Charlotte, she is actually driving a massive wedge into her own relationship with her daughter. It seems like Charlotte is old enough to understand exactly what is happening, and she can clearly see that her mother is acting out of spite rather than genuine concern. The hush-hush rumor floating around the studio is that Charlotte will start rebelling in subtle, heartbreaking ways. She might stop confiding in Lulu, keeping her thoughts and feelings locked away, because she knows her mother will only use them as ammunition against Valentin. The truth might be way more complicated than a teenage rebellion. It could be a fundamental breakdown of trust between a mother and her child. What if Charlotte realizes that Lulu cares more about winning the war against Valentin than she does about her own daughter's happiness? But ladies, the drastic storyline shift does not stop with Charlotte, because it seems like Lulu is making the exact same catastrophic mistake with her son. The unconfirmed leak points to a massive parallel unfolding with Rocco and Britt. We know that Rocco and Britt recently went on the run together, and during that harrowing adventure, they forged an unbreakable bond. High chances are, Rocco views Britt as a deeply trusted confidant and a maternal figure who truly understands him. Yet, just like with Valentin, Lulu and Dante are frantically trying to sever this connection. It seems like they are completely disregarding Rocco's intense emotional attachment to Britt, treating his feelings as irrelevant collateral damage in their quest to maintain absolute control over his life. What if Rocco is watching his parents destroy the one person who made him feel safe during a terrifying ordeal? The situation with Britt is where the hush-hush rumors become truly explosive. It seems like Britt is currently sitting behind bars, facing severe accusations of kidnapping Rocco, when the reality is entirely the opposite. High chances are, Britt is the only reason Rocco survived the terrifying threat posed by Cullum. She protected him, she sacrificed her own safety for him, and how do Dante and Lulu repay her? By allowing her to take the fall and rot in a jail cell. The truth might be way more complicated than a simple misunderstanding. What if Dante and Lulu are intentionally letting Britt suffer because it conveniently removes her from Rocco's life? This unconfirmed leak suggests that their moral compass is severely skewed by their parental panic, leading them to commit a horrific injustice against a woman who literally saved their son's life. What if the actual truth about Britt's heroism comes to light? High chances are, if the rest of the town discovers that Dante and Lulu threw Britt under the bus to save face, the public backlash will be absolutely deafening. It seems like Lulu and Dante are walking on extremely thin ice, pretending to be righteous parents while actively destroying an innocent woman's life. The behind-the-scenes whispers hint that Rocco himself might be the one to expose this dark secret. If Rocco realizes that his parents are the reason Britt is locked in a cage, his perception of them will be shattered forever. The truth might be way more complicated than a family disagreement. It could escalate into a massive public scandal that forces Lulu and Dante to answer some very uncomfortable questions about their ethics and their parenting choices. It seems like Lulu is completely oblivious to the massive storm brewing inside Rocco's heart. High chances are Rocco is experiencing a profound sense of betrayal. He knows the truth about what happened with Cullum, and he knows that Britt is innocent. What if Rocco starts to view Dante and Lulu not as protectors, but as villains in his own story? The hush-hush rumors that Rocco will become increasingly withdrawn, refusing to speak to his parents and harboring a deep, simmering anger. It seems like Lulu believes she is doing the right thing by keeping Rocco away from a perceived criminal, but she is completely failing to listen to her son's actual truth. By silencing Rocco and ignoring his pleas for Britt, Lulu is actively destroying the foundation of their relationship. What if Rocco decides he can no longer trust the people who gave him life? Now, let us pivot back to the impending legal explosion, because the unconfirmed leak regarding Valentin's next move is nothing short of spectacular. High chances are Valentin is not going to sit back and let Lulu dictate his access to Charlotte ever again. It seems like he is quietly preparing to launch a massive, scorched earth custody lawsuit to rip Charlotte away from Lulu's suffocating grip. The truth might be way more complicated than a standard family court battle. What if Valentin uses Carly's vast resources and connections to build an impenetrable case against Lulu? These behind-the-scenes whispers suggest that Valentin is meticulously documenting every single time Lulu unreasonably denied him access, painting a vivid picture of a deeply alienating mother who places her own petty grudges above the psychological well-being of her child. But the most devastating part of this drastic storyline shift involves Charlotte herself. High chances are Valentin will not just rely on high-priced lawyers and documented evidence. He is going to rely on his daughter's own voice. It seems like Charlotte is finally old enough to have her preferences heavily weighed by a family court judge. What if Charlotte bravely takes the stand, looks the judge dead in the eye, and explicitly states that she wants to leave Lulu's house and live with Valentin? The hush-hush rumor is that this courtroom scene is already being mapped out, and it is designed to completely break Lulu's heart. The truth might be way more complicated than a child simply choosing a favorite parent. It would be a profound rejection of Lulu's entire parenting philosophy. It seems like Lulu's worst nightmare is about to become a legally binding reality. If this unconfirmed leak is accurate, winning the custody battle will be a monumental victory for Valentin, but a catastrophic emotional defeat for Lulu. High chances are, Lulu will be left standing in the courtroom, completely stripped of her illusions, finally realizing that her aggressive tactics pushed her daughter right into Valentin's arms. It seems like Lulu will try to blame Valentin, Carly, and everyone else for manipulating Charlotte, but the truth might be way more complicated. What if the only person Lulu truly has to blame is herself? By refusing to listen to Charlotte's desperate pleas for her father, Lulu orchestrated her own downfall. The behind-the-scenes whispers indicate that this loss will send Lulu into a deep, dark spiral, as she is forced to confront the horrifying reality that she alienated her own flesh and blood. And just when you think Lulu could not possibly endure any more pain, the drastic storyline shift promises a secondary blow that will bring her to her knees. High chances are, Britt will eventually be freed from her unjust imprisonment, her name entirely cleared of all the horrific accusations. When that day comes, it seems like Rocco will make a drastic, life-altering decision. The hush-hush rumors that Rocco, despite not having any legal grounds for a custody change, will simply pack his bags and walk out of Lulu's front door. What if Rocco looks at Dante and Lulu, tells them he can no longer live with people who lie and manipulate, and demands to go live with Britt? The truth might be way more complicated than a teenager acting out, awake a desperate escape from a toxic environment. It seems like we are hurtling toward a climax where Lulu loses absolutely everything that matters to her. High chances are, she will be left sitting in an empty, silent house, haunted by the echoes of the children she drove away. What if this unconfirmed leak is the writer's way of delivering a brutal, unforgettable lesson about the true nature of parental love? The truth might be way more complicated than simply keeping kids physically safe. It is about honoring their emotional realities. By stubbornly refusing to listen to Charlotte's love for Valentin and Rocco's devotion to Britt, Lulu is actively destroying her own family. These behind-the-scenes whispers suggest that the emotional devastation will be unparalleled in the history of the show, leaving fans weeping for a mother who loved too hard but listened too little. As we brace ourselves for this drastic storyline shift, it seems like the entire town will be forced to watch Lulu's tragic unraveling. High chances are Carly and Valentin will build a beautiful blended family with Charlotte, while Britt and Rocco forge a chosen family built on genuine trust and mutual survival. What if Lulu is forced to look through the window at the happiness her children found elsewhere, knowing she was the architect of her own isolation? The truth might be way more complicated than a temporary estrangement. This could be a permanent fracturing of the legacy family. The hush hush rumors, promised tears, screaming matches, and shattered hearts. So, ladies, heed this warning before the next episode airs. If you think a mother's love is enough to keep a family together, prepare to watch that illusion burn to the ground in the most agonizing way imaginable.